Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock Central Time, and I'm Dr. John Sherk, and we are here for Brown Bag Lunch, where I talk to you about how to compete for the best talent out there with culture and other important expressions of value, as well as wages when appropriate. But basically, being the kind of boss, the kind of company that people want to work for instead of have to work for. All right, so this week, across the board, my air conditioning clients told me the phone calls started to spike. The calls are coming in. All right, it's officially summertime everywhere from the Midwest to the Deep South. Everywhere that it's summertime, forgiveness for me to the people down under, but the people in this part of the world, it's the beginning of summer and the ball is rolling. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about resilience and willpower as relates to the challenges that go into being, the guy who's got to climb a ladder and get into an attic that's, 130 degrees, 140 degrees. How do we handle the whole issue of expectations, what it means to lean into one's manhood, all of the above. Okay, so historically, in craft labor across the board, it's a predominantly male, not only, but predominantly a male profession. And with that comes a certain amount of, pushing and shoving of testosterone driven expressions of manhood. We could sum it all under a just suck it up, whether that gets said to each other or even that gets said to ourselves in response to feeling pushed by expectations, pushed by a dispatcher, being able to get through the rest of the day. So what do we do with this? How do we maximize resilience? Because I can tell you this, in companies that lose great techs, they say things like, you're just going to have to suck it up. In companies where great techs want to work, they have something more than that to offer, right? And when I talk about competing with culture instead of wages, it's that sort of thing. I mean, when I don't mean you shouldn't pay your people, but what I do mean is if all you intend to do is pay better or what you feel like is better than anybody else, or at least you've paid fairly, and that's the end of the situation, now it's on them. All you really have to say to somebody at that point is, well, suck it up. The problem is that that's not what high performance looks like, right? So what does high performance look like? Well, let me give you a little bit of background. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from Kelly McGonigal, who is a professor at Stanford. She's written several books way back in the day, maybe 2011, I think. She wrote a book called The Willpower Instinct. We're going to talk about some of that today, but we're going to put a link into the comments. If you want to see a YouTube video from her, more about her, there's more resources there. But here's the gist of what the research says. Willpower in practice is a cocktail of hormones that are moving primarily through our brain. Okay, so it's dopamine, epinephrine. There's a set of hormones. For now, it doesn't matter really which ones, but what it does matter is that they, in a sense, gather like a tank. They get used in literal volume because it's a stuff, it's a thing, it's an amount. They get used, and it's possible to use them faster than we can reproduce them, right? Just like if you could drive a car faster, and if by driving it faster, you used more fuel, but it was a certain distance to the next gas station, if your pace is out of sync, you could run out of gas before the next station, right? Now, we don't run out completely. However, we have rises and dips in the amount, literally in volume, measured in volume. We have rises and dips in the amount of willpower, the amount of resilience that we have, right? So when someone is saying, oh, I'm going to tough it out, I'm going to power through, that emotional moment, that experience, always correlates with a certain hormonal shift in our brains. And if those hormones are not available, it simply won't happen, right? So it doesn't really matter who pushes you. It doesn't really matter if somebody challenges your manhood. It doesn't really matter if there's a dispatcher saying, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. If it's not in the tank, it's not going to happen. When we talk about it not being in the tank, usually we mean like I'm out of energy physically. But what's really happening, we can have a certain drain there, but we have ways of creating more energy metabolically. Where we run out of energy is in that dopamine, that cocktail of hormones that correlates with everything else and drives everything else. Okay. So what do we do with that? Well, the most important thing to understand is in order to maximize performance, we have to factor in intentional recovery. I'm going to say that again. In order to maximize performance, we have to factor in intentional recovery. I'll give you an example from Kelly McGonigal, Dr. McGonigal's research. One of her examples, 2 groups of recovering drug addicts, which is a willpower issue, right? How to say yes and no to something you're addicted to. They tracked them and the amount of sleep that they had. And those who had 7 hours of sleep or a little bit less, and those who had 8 hours of sleep or a little bit more, those with 8 hours were dramatically more likely to not go back to rehab. Just that 1 hour of sleep. Well, why? Because they're getting just that much more time for recovery, for intentional recovery. They're literally getting, sleep is a very important means, time, strategy, a very important way of refilling your hormonal tank to drive more willpower. Okay. Now, what are the things that drive more into your tank so that you have more of the hormones? Because when we say, well, I just have willpower, it feels so much like it's driven by our character. And I guess to some degree, it's related to character, but it's much more driven by our hormonal balances than it is some sort of warrior mentality or something like that. That warrior mentality literally runs out of gas if our hormonal tank runs out. So how do we recover? Well, according to Dr. McGonigal, there are 4 basic things we should be thinking about. One is eating low glycemic foods, right? Some of this is going to be stuff you're going to be like, oh, John, are you telling me this again? Everybody tells me this. But I'm telling you, when you eat a Snickers bar or when you eat something with a lot of sugar in it, and your blood glucose spikes and your insulin spikes, your hormonal stuff is going with it, right? So you're using more of your hormonal cocktail when you eat sugary foods, right? So if you want to work on your willpower reserve, then you really need to limit those because you're not using up those hormones fundamentally. Next is exercise. And we're not talking about a lot of exercise. Now, people who do exercise moderately and regularly, we do autopsies on their brain. We study their brain, not just only autopsies, but this front part of our brain where we really use willpower and we make decisions and we say no to things for good purposes later. People who exercise, that part of their brain gets bigger and gets more connected inside of their brain. It just does. We just know it. And so, but what's interesting is if you're talking about somebody who runs marathons, that's not really what's required. There's a little bit of advantage if you're really fit. There's actually a point at which it has a reverse impact if you're spending too much time exercising that way. But the great new study out recently, I just read it yesterday, the impact of different levels of fitness on morbidity over time. And, they had people ranked from elite to above average to below average, and then just said low, which is sort of like just no exercise, not fit. And then they looked at where was the greatest impact, like which notch Is it from average to above average, or where's the biggest jump? And if you considered health benefit as a scale from 0 to 100, and low was at 0, getting to below average took you all the way to 50. Right? This thing correlates. This is hormones as well. So if you want to have more willpower, a 15-minute brisk walk every day will do half the battle. Right? You don't have to, be a triathlete, and you don't have to, run marathons or bike 150 miles a week or whatever. There's a lot of different people who are really into that side of it, and that's fine, but that's not where the greatest impact is. The greatest impact is just getting from nothing to below average. So, we're literally setting the bar low, but that's on purpose because that's where the greatest impact is. Okay. So exercise refills your hormonal cocktail tank, right? So low glycemic foods, exercise. Third is meditation. Again, why would meditation? These are all 4 of these things refill your hormonal tank. If you take 10 minutes each morning to listen to a guided meditation, you could look up the app Headspace or any kind of, this style of meditation. It increases blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. It's part of the brain where we use willpower and make decisions based on choice and not as instinctive reaction to things. It forces blood into that part of our brain and develops our brains there. And so consistent meditation simply improves both attention and self-control. And lastly is sleep. I probably push this button more than any other with my clients. If you're a technician and you're listening to this and you say, I want to give my best to the company that I work for, or I want to give my best to my family, or whatever it is, pay attention to your sleep. Pay attention to your sleep. I gave that example earlier of the people who were recovering from drug addiction and how just 1 hour sleep made a big difference in how many people went back into recovery. Sleep deprivation impairs how the brain metabolizes glucose. And even if you try to refuel your brain with like sugar or coffee, it really doesn't work as well. It doesn't work at all. You need a minimum of 7 hours a night and up to 9 hours. And I know as I'm saying that, it's like, what kind of dream world do you live in, John, where I can get 9 hours of sleep? What I'm saying is just pay attention to it. If your partner complains about snoring, go get a sleep study done. Go get it done. You will be surprised at least finding a way to measure the quality of your sleep. A sleep study will measure the number of times per hour that you have a breath stoppage. And most good ones will tell you how much your blood oxygen fluctuates while you sleep. Okay. And you'll be surprised what a difference it can make if you need to get a CPAP machine and have that recovery and wake up in the morning with a fully refueled tank of hormone cocktail to go make choices throughout the day. Okay. So what's the net of all this? The net of all of it is, it frankly is not good leadership to tell people to man up. It's great leadership to require people to tell you what is their active recovery game plan, right? What is their active recovery game plan? And that game plan should include at least 4 things. How to avoid sugar, when and how they're going to exercise minimally. Again, we're not talking about running 10 miles a day, 15 minutes of walking. And one more comment here. A lot of technicians will say, I'm out there working all day. Yeah, but you're not doing this kind of work. You're not doing something where you elevate your heart rate consistently for 15 minutes, right? You're up and down a ladder, but it's not the same thing, right? You need to elevate your heart rate for at least 15 minutes to get this impact. Third, meditation. look into meditation. If the whole concept is foreign to you, just look it up and learn more about it. And again, maybe the app Headspace can help you with this as well. And lastly, improve the length and quality of your sleep. These 4 things will give you the horsepower that you need in the heat of the summer to get through long days and sometimes long nights, depending on what kind of contracts your company has, and perform and not feel like you're a limp rag at the end of August. All right? Low sugar, exercise, meditation, sleep. All right, my name is Dr. John Sherk. I am here to help you any way I can to compete for talent with culture and other kinds of support instead of wages only, because that's really where the game is. Compete, friends, compete for talent, not for business. Because if you compete for talent, the business will take care of itself. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week.